knows. Hi, MR gentlemen. The comparison of AMLO to Trump is nothing but extremely lazy thinking. No one would have thought comparing AMLO to Trump if the latter didn't happen to be president this year. In fact, no one did make this comparison ever in either man's life and career before. Yeah, of course, it's utterly. John Oliver, and I strong.
Was that Oliver's point?
Among many things in that extremely stupid segment. I would strongly recommend that people watch the opening of this past Tuesday's TMBS where I went over it. I mean, it really matters. And I mean, and John Oliver, look, again, you don't have to run interference for the Venezuelan government, Nicolas Maduro at all. They have their own significant problems. But the United States is on a coup setting against the Venezuelan government, and they have interfered consistently, including the Bush administration supporting a coup in 2002, which temporarily removed Hugo Chavez from power. Hugo Chavez, again, someone who there is very real and warranted criticism, but also democratically elected. And our first concern in the United States should be in opposing those types of imperial interventions. And John Oliver's segment on Venezuela was totally decontextualized, missed really important details. And several years ago, or in 2014, I believe, he did a segment on Dilma Rousseff, which was utilized by the Brazilian far-right movement, which deposed her on a technicality and has now imprisoned Lula da Silva on incredibly flimsy evidence while he is the leading presidential candidate in the country, and also in a broader context where leftist leaders have been assassinated, and there's a whole austerity policy which is dismantling all of the, again, modest and moderate social democratic gains of the Workers' Party. And for John Oliver to do that is irresponsible, intellectually vacuous, and morally disgusting. And this is from last August, Trump speaking about Venezuela. Again, this is the context. I'm not saying that we don't need to have a narrative about Maduro and Chavez one way or another, frankly, to recognize that in the United States, if you are not first and foremost opposing an aggressive sanctions regime, which are not targeted to deal with corruption issues, they're targeted to ease up the military to foment a coup against a democratically elected government. That we have, going back to the Bush era, aggressively opposed this government, which has achieved some real social aims, and also supported an opposition which is unfortunately disproportionately right-wing, even as they have very legitimate grievances. The first and foremost concern that we have with regard to Venezuela is opposing U.S. intervention, period. And this is Donald Trump. How this clip was not in the John Oliver segment is beyond me.
Tell us what you're considering for Venezuela. What options are on the table right now to deal with this mess?
We have many options for Venezuela. And by the way, I'm not going to rule out a military option. We have many options for Venezuela. This is our neighbor. This is, we're all over the world. And we have troops all over the world in places that are very, very far away. Venezuela is not very far away, and the people are suffering.
Okay, so earlier in the show, when we said, like, why wouldn't he just start a war there, I was going to make a joke, like, it's not even that far of a flight.
So, look, I think, again, I have to keep making, in Lula's case, I support Lula. Period. Any critiques I have of Lula would be from the left, though those are hard to make in a realistic way given the material realities of when he governed. There's real critiques that I've heard of Chavez and Maduro on civil rights, on structural planning to sustain the achievements of the Bolivarian politics, of corruption that's organic in the administration. Those are real. And if you want to have an actual filled out conversation on Venezuela, you can and you should. But in an environment like this, given the entire sweep of U.S. history in Latin America and the fact that the Bush administration supported a coup, the Obama administration was hostile and put tough sanctions on Venezuela and was not serious about diplomacy. In fact, ironically, the Obama administration was far more willing to break taboos on diplomacy with Iran and Cuba than Venezuela. And now a Trump administration where Pence has alluded to, Pompeo openly talked about as head of the CIA, regime change. And now we have what everybody's, and certainly I'm sure John Oliver understands to know, a stupid, dangerous, belligerent, immoral president to go out and do a a mediocre middlebrow commentary on them, where you don't talk about, first of all, any of the achievements. You don't talk about the democratic process, and first and foremost, you mock and minimize the Venezuelan government's concern over U.S. intervention and say, in this case, that's not what's happening, when you literally have clips like that you didn't utilize. And you didn't talk about what happened in 2002, which was a coup that basically was supported, as far as we know, by the Bush administration. It restored oligarchs to power in Venezuela. It lasted for about 24 to 48 hours, and Venezuelan troops basically, there were enough in the army that still supported Chavez. They took him back out of prison, flew him back to the presidential palace, and those people fled who had led the coup. The Bush administration supported it. The New York Times editorial page celebrated it. And this was at a time, by the way, in 2002, when there were far less critiques to make of the Venezuelan government. It was a democratically elected government implementing serious social reforms in, of course, a profoundly unequal society presided over by oligarchs that were supported by U.S. corporate and intelligence interests. And to do a segment that does not go deep into that, and it's John Oliver, it's fine. You can also go deep into the failures and abuses of Maduro. Great. But if you don't include those, then you're a useful idiot for what actually might be about to happen in Venezuela, which would be just an absolute travesty.